Michael, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Simon. I've been looking forward to it for a while, so it's great to be here.
Yeah, we put this in a while ago now, so I'm really excited about it. And we have to start by saying I hope you don't mind me saying, which is you're going to be the oldest person that's ever been on the podcast. And it's a perfect conversation to then also talk about longevity. So I think you're going to have some nuggets to share with us.
Okay, hope so.
So when thinking about your long-term health, so I'm in my 40s, what sort of things should we be thinking about for longevity? You're into your 80s now, I think.
Right, 83.
Mm. So what sort of things should we be thinking about for longevity?
Well, I think that we should be thinking mostly about our nutrition, what we're eating, and also about our lifestyle. Because I don't know if you've ever heard of the blue zones, but the healthiest and longest living people on the planet uh, live on the blue zones. There are 5 blue zones, and it's basically their nutrition. It's plant-based nutrition, and also lifestyle practices that they've been doing for like probably hundreds of years. They're in small rural areas in different parts of the world. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want me to name them.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
Okay.
I actually I knew a little bit about Japan, and I wrote about some. I can't remember one of the cities. I was writing a little bit about Japan because I think they had the highest population of centurions, so essentially people over 100 years old, and they were eating obviously kind of a plant based but also
And
fish based
right,
kind of diet.
Okinawa.
Okinawa.
Yeah. So anyway, the blue zones were discovered. I think it was about 2009. Dan Buettner wrote the book, The Blue Zones, and he was working for National Geographic, and they sent him on a study to find out where do the healthiest and longest living people on the planet live. So it was 2 years, and he found the 5 blue zones, and the one you mentioned was Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece, Loma Linda, California, and Nicoya, Costa Rica. So, and it's basically, they were trying to find out, well, he was trying to find out, are there similarities among these different blue zones that people can take away that this should be a good start and a good base to living a healthy life. So that's what it was. And it was published, this book, The Blue Zones by Dan Buettner. And actually, on last year, he revisited the blue zones, and it's a documentary on Netflix. It's called Living to 100: Secret of the Blue Zones, and they're trying in the U.S. now. They're trying to they've already started working on different cities in the United States to see if they can turn them into blue zones for people who want to be healthy. So I think that's the most important thing. It's a lifestyle and nutrition, and staying away and learning a lot. Well, I don't know if it's staying away, but learning a lot about the body's self-healing powers, which we've abandoned to a great extent because of our dependency on drugs, and as a way to cure our diseases, which end up that they really what they do is they treat the symptoms. But with the proper diet and the proper lifestyle, you can prevent diseases, and you can even reverse some diseases. So this is what I think is very important.
If we can, I'd love to break some of those things down so we understand what proper nutrition is, but also you're talking about preventative measures there as well. So was there any commonalities between those blue zones and things you're doing? I know we're talking about nutrition, but can we go to a few levels deeper than that?
Okay. Beside nutrition, and I've adopted because I went along with it. I've been plant-based for the last 16 years, and I've been following a lot of what the blue zones the people are doing, what they have in common. One of the things they have in common is is exercise. They do exercise, but they live in rural areas, and their life, it's not only just doing exercise, like exercise once or twice or 5 times a week, once a day. They live their lives. The most important thing is moving, is natural moving. So that's what they do. They live their lives moving a lot. They don't sit and watch TV or on their phones, or they don't spend their time. Their lives are built around moving. And also they work until their later years. These people that are working till 100 because they work, because that's the way they live their lives. So they walk to work, they climb, they live in towns where it's up and down, and that's where they're getting their movement. So it's very important to move a lot. The other thing they have is they have ways of reducing stress. Now, stress is extremely dangerous, and we live in in the West, and most of us live in we have a lot of stress in our lives. Maybe it's stress from the family, maybe it's stress from the work we do, relationships. And it's very important, because what stress does, it causes chaos in the body. Because once you have stress, whether it's stress that, adrenaline stress, which is the flight and fight syndrome, or the cortisol, which is, it's also a stress hormone that is released, and it's sort of like slow moving. It's not for a flight and fight. But when we are stressed out a lot of the time, during the day, for whatever reason, the cortisol is released. And cortisol, you're not supposed to have this thing in your body for long periods of time. It's supposed to be, short term. And then then we're unstressed, so we don't have that problem anymore. So we have to work on reducing stress. And they live their lives, fairly stress free. But we can do it in the West. We can, meditation reduces stress. Exercise reduces stress. Different activities, what we're interested in, reduces stress. Tai Chi, yoga, but it's very important to, just for me and personally, is I try to gauge myself every day. Is like, where am I? Am I stressed out for some reason? And as soon as I find out that there's something negative, like stress happening, I'm trying to find out, well, how can I, release that? Maybe it's a thought, that causes me to, I think something, this is really bad, or whatever it is. And then I get into another negative thought, and that causes stress in my body. And I try to deal with that. So stress is another thing. Relationships, caring relationships. What they do in a lot of the blue zones, some of them have, they go to religion, they have religions, religious services. They have a religious relationship. They believe in a higher power. Most of them do. And that, helps them as well. That's, another thing that's important is the relationships. And also another thing that's very important, which I find is very important for me, is to have purpose in your life. And one of the things that happens, when you get old, because, now it's longevity is what I'm interested in. The Western, way is, you reach a certain age, okay, you're in your 70s. What else is there left? You're retired. The worst thing you can do is retire and not do anything. People love it. That's one of the things, you live the dream, the American dream, for example, and you retire, and then that's it. And that's when you start going down as far as your health. So you really, that you really have to keep active. And one of the ways is to have purpose. What do you like? There's something special in your life? Do you enjoy playing music? Do you enjoy taking care of people, working your garden? I love to, write. I love music. So it's finding purpose and not going along with a basic idea or a belief that once you reach a certain age, your life is over. That is like, it's all downhill from here. No, it's not at all. You could live the 80s and 90s and live a vibrant life. And that's what people have to understand. The only problem is if we're not healthy. If we're not healthy, because, this is the U.S. I live in Mexico, but it's very similar to the U.S. when you get into your 70s, 70% of the people have a chronic disease. So the problem is you want to be healthy when you get into your 80s. You want to be healthy when you get into your 90s, because a chronic disease, no matter whatever you want to do, can just, kill everything, the opportunity.
But when did you in your life start thinking about health and fitness and longevity? Was there a particular point in your life where you thought, oh, I really need to pay attention to this? Or is it something that you've always thought about?
No, I think actually I grew up. My father was a butcher. We had so many butchers in the family. We used to eat meat and animal products every single day. But it was in I think it was 1976 when I was getting into Eastern philosophy and religion, reading about it, studying it, and many people on that side of the world, in the East, are vegetarians. And I decided at 76, my wife and I, we both changed to vegetarian diets. So that was the beginning. So it was like 30 years, a little bit more than over 30 years that we were just eating. We didn't eat meat. Everything else was okay. My brother at that time, he had been eating plant-based for like 10 years into 76. And my problem was I was getting sick every year. Not very seriously sick. I would get sore throat, congestion, headaches, fever, but I was getting sick twice a year, and it was like clockwork. Every year I was getting sick, and I couldn't understand it. So my brother, who was plant-based at that time, he said, "Well, maybe you should try giving up dairy." So I didn't want to do that because I was attached to cheese, which most of us are, and yogurt and pizza. So I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to change. But after a while, years had passed, he told me he told me to read this book called The China Study, which was written by T. Colin Campbell. He did this 20-year study in China. He was invited by the emperor, that was Chao Enlai, to do a study on cancer, work with the Chinese doctors team to find out, because he eventually died from cancer. So it was a 20-year study, and I read the book, and it was like, that's all I needed. So I decided to make the change. That was 16 years, almost 17 years ago. And that was for me, that was my own personal health. But what really made a change for me in my life was, changed my idea to helping people, was an incident, a friend that we had, my wife and I, here in Mexico. She was living in Cozumel. Her name was Beatrice, and she had a heart attack. She was in her early 70s, and she was rushed to the hospital, and they did a complete bypass, surgery on her heart, quadruple bypass surgery. And she even had a heart attack on the operating table. But she survived it, and she went home. She was living I think I mentioned Cozumel. And a year later, she had pain in her arm, and the doctors wanted to see her again. They got her back, and they checked her out, and they said they wanted to put a stent in because the vein that would replace the original artery to the heart was already blocked. And then I later on learned that it's because you got to stop. That's what how do you prevent heart disease. So anyway, so Beatrice, they told her that they tried to put the stent in, but they couldn't do that. Why? Because the vein was too narrow. They couldn't do it, so they told her that we couldn't do anything, and that they sent her home, and they just told her to avoid, heavy exercise, even climbing stairs. But what they didn't tell her, and they told my wife and her son, was that she had about 6 months to live. So I was already on a plant-based diet for almost a couple of years at that time. And this book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Caldwell Esselstyn, who worked at the Cleveland Clinic, I lent it to her because he was dealing with rejects at the Cleveland Clinic that they couldn't even operate on them because some of these heart patients couldn't even walk from one side of the room to the other. But he was having success with surgery, with plant-based nutrition and lifestyle practices. He was saving like 85 to 90% of these people. So I gave her the book, and she read the book, and she turned plant-based. And then, as a result, instead of living 6 months, she lived almost 9 years. So for me, it was like, wow, I'm reading about these doctors saving people, but I had a friend who did this. And for me, it was like, that was it, you know. And I was questioning, why isn't nutrition number one in order to treat people with heart disease? But they don't, because the doctors don't learn about nutrition when they go for the, you know, medical school and healthy lifestyle practices. And that's the way it is even today. So that was the thing that turned around. And from that moment on, it was like, okay, now I want to tell people about this. And I wanted to find out, well, if it's heart disease can be treated with these lifestyle changes, what about other diseases, you know? And it's true, you know, you have high blood pressure, you have obesity, you have type 2 diabetes, but you can prevent it there. And it's really funny because you don't have to, there are not different things to do for different diseases. It's basically the same thing, living a healthy life, nutrition, lifestyle practice, and you can stop worrying about, you know, what do I have to do for this and that, you know, and just getting off the drugs, because basically what happens with doctors, you know, in the medical people, is that all you can do is manage the disease, manage the symptoms, and that's not true. You know, it's not true, and that's why, you know, plant-based nutrition to me is the key, is the base. Plus these you know, lifestyle, adding those lifestyle practices, and I have other lifestyle practices which I follow. And I do, well, I play pickleball, which is, I'm addicted to pickleball for like 4 times a week. And it was really interesting because when I was watching the 4-part series on the Blue Zones, they got to Loma Linda, California. And what they do is they play pickleball there. These people on the who are living in that blue zone, so they play pickleball. It's like, yes, they're playing pickleball. That's a great thing. So, and I added other things. I do hanging. I do walking a lot, and I also do breath holds. So I added things on to me, which I found are important for me, and people can add on what works for them. But the basics are pretty much the same.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's almost like you're talking about just being proactive about your taking control of your nutrition as a proactive way of preventing future disease. And part of one of the I released a book late last year, and one of the research I was doing on that piece of book on that book was just around this global epidemic we have right now, which is around the obesity crisis. And I think there was a stat which was about 50%. It was a crazy stat. 50% of the global population, so it's going to be close to 4 billion people in the next 10 years, are either going to be overweight or obese. I mean, that was staggering to me. And the other stat I found, which was staggering, which was that 80% of deaths over a certain age, like over 50, were from preventable causes, from lifestyle preventable causes. There's a particular word for that, but I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically from all-cause mortality, something along those lines. But it's the things that you're talking about, diabetes, heart, you know, cancers, you're talking about heart disease. It's staggering, some of these stats, aren't they?
Yeah, it's amazing. And what people really also have to understand is that, you know, diseases don't just happen. You don't just get a cancer popping up, you know, because you go take a mammogram or whatever you do test. It develops over many, many years. Cancers could take decades to develop. My father, he was during World War II. He was working on because he had 2 children. He didn't go to war, but he was working at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. He was painting the hulls of ships, because he was a painter. And in the hulls of the ships, there was asbestos. And he was living a good life, my father. And then where was it? It was 2014 when he collapsed at a New Year's party. Nobody knew what it was. And he had mesothelioma, which is a cancer of the lining of the lung, which is caused by asbestos. So there was 40 years for that to develop. So that's what people have to understand. Heart disease doesn't just happen. People start getting problems when they're in their 20s. If you're not taking care of yourself, maybe it starts as maybe a little fat in the bloodstream and this and that. But this is what happens, that we have to realize that you can't wait till the last minute and expect, miracle changes. It's like the important thing to do. If you really want to live a long life and a long and healthy life, you have to start thinking about taking care of yourself, at an early age.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fascinating. So you've talked about having a plant-based diet. So therefore you're thinking about fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing. What else would be part of that diet that makes up something that's getting you longevity?
Well, it's a combination of plant-based foods, includes grains, cereals, all kinds of vegetables, nuts, seeds, fruit. It's so many things that people already eat. They're comfort foods, and so if somebody starts off at if they want to change their diet, and so you start off with, well, maybe some of the things you're already eating are plant-based. So it's really important. But another thing that's very important is that it's important that the least amount of processed is very important, because food is processed. And people are, addicted to ultra processed foods that they buy every single day. And, you look at the ingredients, and if it has more than a few ingredients, some canned foods, for example, they have like a dozen ingredients. You don't even understand what they mean. So it's really, starting off. If you want to change, it's a slow process. It could be a slow process. I changed immediately once I decide this is what I want to do, but not everybody is like that. And it's important to eat whole plant foods. Almost all foods are processed anyway. I mean, if you eat beans and grains, you're going to cook them. So that's, they're processed. Yeah, you eat corn, the corn on the cob, is not processed because it's straight from the cob. But once you make tortillas here in Mexico, it's processed. So it's the level of process that you're going through. For now, for example, there are people who are changing to, changing their diet to plant-based, but they're eating products that, plant-based, but they're doctored, they're processed. Hamburgers have to taste like meat hamburgers. Hot dogs have to taste like, cheese has to taste like real, you're a cheese. So what they do, the companies say, what can we add to this thing here in order for people that are going to eat it, because they want it to taste just like the real, what they've been used to all their lives. So a lot of the foods, even though they're plant-based, are also highly processed, because that's what it takes to get them to take like what they used to. So the whole idea, one of the things that's really important, that it doesn't take that long to change, that you can, it's really setting up new synapses in the brain. The brain gets used to anything. You develop habits. It takes a little while to develop habits, but once you keep practicing and trying it, the brain will adapt to a new habit, and you'll end up enjoying it, because there's a lot of great food, plant-based food.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Because like a lot of the diet that people would have, certainly in the UK, in the US, etc., like we discussed, it's pizzas and it's the takeaways and it's these. I don't think people are really aware of just how much damage those types of foods do for us. They've got all these additives in them, all these extra sugars and, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know anyone who just, if they open a box of chocolate, just has one, because it's addictive. And I think the way I try to think about it and define it is just that, if I have an apple, I just eat an apple. It's just that. If I have a chocolate, I eat five. Like, it's a really basic way of looking at something, but just saying, is this a food good for me or bad for me? And if it's in any way addictive, if it makes me need to want to have another one, a crisp, a Pringle, those types of things, once you pop, you can't stop. I mean, it's written on the label. It's clearly addictive. And I just feel like any food like that, where you feel in any way out of control, you've got to avoid them.
And
You've got to avoid them.
And that's what the companies do, to keep you addictive. I mean, it's all a science, how to get people addicted. What they do is they combine the fats and the sugars and the salt in certain combinations, especially the fast food places. They have people, psychologists that are, trained in getting people to crave different types of, foods. And that's what they do. And an interesting thing, which I studied, this book was called The Cheese Trap. I forgot who wrote it. He was about cheese. Our addiction. Cheese is one of the most processed foods on the planet. I mean, it goes through so many different processes to get people to eat it, with the salt and making it fermented. I mean, it's very processed. And another thing with cheese, which he read in his book, is called milk. All mother's milk, whatever the animal is, has a substance called casomorphine in it. And people don't know about this, but it's when the baby is born, it comes back to the breast all the time. And people think, oh, it's love, the mother, it's a love. It's like, no, it's an addiction. And this casomorphine it's make sure that the baby comes back to the breast. It's called casomorphine, and it's actually in the milk, whether it's a human milk, whether it's cow's milk, whether it's any milk, that brings the baby back to the breast. And it's called casomorphine. And so when we eat, human beings are the only animals that are never weaned off of milk. All other animals are weaned off of milk eventually, So so when we are still on the milk, or the cheese, we're getting the casomorphine that's keeping us on the cheese. But it's it's a thing.
Well, I was kind of aware about cheese in the fact of, again, it's one of those things where you just have some and then you just want more and more and more. And I just thought, this is clearly an addictive substance in some way, but I just didn't know the facts behind it. It's so interesting what you're sharing there.
Yeah. And
so what's that? Casomorphine.
Yes, more, and it has the word morphine in it. That's a funny thing,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what could be more addictive than morphine?
Well, maybe fentanyl. Yeah. So, and the thing you mentioned before, which is really because I wrote about it in my second book, was the thing about this. We focus on the pandemic, with the COVID pandemic. But we're missing the pandemic of chronic disease pandemic, which is all over the world. And it's getting worse and worse every year. And nobody's paying attention to that, So to me, it's like we got to focus. And the statistics, I mean, I have the statistics somewhere. The amount of people that die from heart disease, from the chronic diseases is like, there's no comparison compared to the people that died from, the COVID-19. It's like, so it's really a chronic disease pandemic, which is different than an epidemic from what is it? I forgot the word from it, but it's from viruses. So it's different. There are two types of this. These is, if you focus on the viruses and what's caused by bacteria, that's one type of which they focus on for the pandemics, and then you have the chronic diseases, which is caused by what your lifestyle and what you practice on your lifestyle. But that's what we have to focus in more and more. And it's interesting because I'm just listening to Robert Kennedy Jr., who is now head of the health, in the U.S., and he's going to be turning that around to focus more on chronic diseases, which we're not putting enough emphasis in that. What are the real causes? What are the causes of chronic diseases? That's what we have to focus on. When we were going through the first, what we're going through the pandemic, and there are people going into lockdown, I didn't get the vaccine. And I was just wondering, is the medical profession, when are doctors, if we're in lockdown, why not help us get healthy? Why not, it was a job, we weren't doing anything anyway, just sitting around, we couldn't go out in many places all over the world. How come there was no focus? How come there weren't any governments helping us to get healthy during the pandemic? It was like there was no focus on that. And that was like, now I see where that's going,
Do you feel there is some conspiracy around, because for us to be in this situation where we're looking at, we're not in a pandemic anymore, but we do have a global crisis around weight. I've just shared some of the stats earlier. We also have a global crisis around, I think it was 80%. It was a crazy high number. It really shocked me, which is the number of people that are dying from lifestyle related diseases, which might be smoking, alcohol, food. Obviously food relates to being overweight, or heart disease, type 2 diabetes. So all of those, like the biggest few killers, are all related to a lifestyle. So, but all of those things, behind that, there's money.
Yeah,
Cigarettes,
I
there's
was going to
money.
say that very
Alcohol, there's
word.
money. Yeah, behind that, the food industry, one of the biggest industries in the world, controlled by about 11 global companies. And I listened to a podcast ages ago, and they were defining your food type. Was your food made by love, by someone local, or was it made by a global corporation in a factory? And they were like, and does it come from a packet? And therefore, where did that packet come from? And it's really interesting because the person he was talking about had a really strong opinion around, that's not food. If it's made in a packet from this factory, that's not food. It's a substance which is going to harm you. Food is something that's grown locally to you or reared locally to you, depending on your preference, by a farmer. And they were really clear on that. It was a really interesting debate. But what's your view behind all of that?
Well, it's exactly what you said. It's the money. There's no money in healthy lifestyle practice. If they want to, we're talking about companies, the industries that make money off your being sick. They don't make money off your being healthy. So it's like, and it's not only the company, it's all the investors in the company, their stockholders in the company. And I remember reading once it was one of the heads of the milk, I don't know if it was the milk company or something. And he said, it's out anything that sells milk, we're going with. So they do these, propaganda things like, to milk, you never outgrow your need for milk or anything like that. It's anything to make money, and people, they use cherry picking. They publish articles and they cherry pick different information, and in order to tell you what's good. So they confuse you by publishing books on what's healthy and what's not healthy. But really, the goal is not to. It doesn't matter whether they're right or they care whether they're telling the truth or not. The most important thing for these companies is to make sure that you're confused. So it doesn't matter once you're confused and you're not sure that, well, I might as well stick with what I'm doing. You're not going to change if you're confused. You're just going to stay put. And that's what they're relying on. And that's where a lot of this, and anybody, during the whole pandemic with the thing with censoring, I was the first time, my wife and I, we had published a Facebook page. It was in Spanish. It was called The Vegan Wave in Spanish. So we were publishing, and I had a lot of followers. I had over 2,000 followers. But this was then the pandemic started, and and it wasn't only censoring people that were talking. They considered extreme conspiracy theorists on the vaccine, but we were publishing articles on health. So my wife, she's a great plant-based cook. She's fantastic. So she would put her recipes on there. So instead of regular milk, we were substituting with soy milk, almond milk, any other milks. And all of a sudden, we published the article, and they censored it because we said that with the reduced animal fat content, you may find that you'll be able to lose weight, you may have less problems. It's better for your health. So they stopped us, and they said because we can't say we were violating the community, the community, I forgot the word, but they didn't allow us to publish anymore. So we had to shut down the Facebook page. But that's what we did. We were censored because we were writing, and that was about health. So anything that when they're if they're moving to promote a product or promote an idea or a movement, they won't accept your if you disagree with it, and then you become a conspiracy theorist. And so censoring or threatening. How many doctors were threatened during the pandemic that they couldn't say that this would be good for their patients, and so that's what they do. They censor. So there's this movement. If you disagree, there's a danger. You may even lose your job. So, and it's all for the money and the power to control what people. I have my latest book with the information warfare, the battle for truth and freedom, and a large part of that is with health and how they're just manipulating the information. It's so that you just keep so they can control what you think, and how you behave.
What sort of things in your book have you written about relating to health? What sort of situations have you discussed?
Well, I discuss about the pandemic, which I just mentioned, the chronic disease pandemic, which we're in right now, and then I talk about the microbiome. That's something new which I didn't treat in my first book. The microbiome, the studies with the microbiome is the most studied area of health in the last 5 years. There's like 5,000 studies every year on the microbiome, and this was the microbiome is all of the microbes that inhabit or inside our body and on our body that we live with. And the movement, and this is especially true with the pharmaceutical industry, kill the microbes, destroy the microbes, and that's what when it goes back all the way to Pasteur, when with his germ theory of disease, that's what the cause of most of the diseases is the germs. So we had to kill the germs, and that's what we've learned. And all of a sudden, with the study of the microbiome, which really began in 2007, because the electron microscope had reached another level of microscopy, where all of a sudden we were being exposed to this tremendous universe of microbes that were living inside of our body. We are more microbe cells than we are human cells, and these microbes are living inside and outside our body. And the best we could do is to live in harmony with them, because they take care of us. Yeah, there's some that aren't that good. Even people have had COVID microbes inside, viruses inside them, AIDS viruses. We have all kinds of viruses inside us. I had tuberculosis in 1970, and that was a long time ago. And then I got through. At that time, it was streptomycin was the antibiotic, and I had to get injected like for 30 days with that. But I got over the disease, the tuberculosis, and that was it. And then this was about 12 years ago. My older son got tuberculosis, but it was a much worse case, and it was like you go through a whole more intense treatment. So anyway, I went to the doctor because I told him that I had tuberculosis. So he said, I got it. Well, okay, I'm going to give you a test to see if the microbe, the bacteria, the tuberculosis bacteria is still in your body. And he gave me this test. So he gave me a skin test over here. You can see it if you were here. It says if this forms a what do you call it? It blows up. Then that means that you still have tuberculosis bacteria in your body. And sure enough, it blew up. A blister blew up like a tremendous, and there was it. He said, but don't worry about it. Your body is taking care of it. So our body is taking care of ourselves. We have to understand that we have this this body is such a gift. It has a tremendous self-healing power, but we have to help it. We can't, and the way we help it is by not getting in its way because it wants to take care of it. When we break a bone, we give the credit to the doctor. The doctor, puts a cast on us and the bone gets better. It's the body that healed the bone. Same thing with cuts. The body is what does the healing. The doctor should accept his role as helping the body do its work. And that's what we should do, is accept that. So if we eat properly and we follow a proper lifestyle, that we take care of ourselves and we really cherish the body because of its preciousness, then we'll start having a connection with our body and we won't need to rely so much on doctors and hospitals, and that's an incredible thing. And that's the way I feel about it. One of the things I feel like we got two gifts when we were born. And what is the greatest gift that a human being has ever received? And it's the gift of life, because without life, we wouldn't be. And then there's the other gift, which we take for granted, is our body, because that's where life lives. It lives inside of our body. If we didn't have a body, it would be the same thing. So if we really want to have if we really treasure our life, and we have to, treat our body so that we can live a really healthy life and just thrive, during our life.
Such an interesting perspective. Why don't more people do this? Why are these views the minority instead of the majority? Whereas we should be, maybe it's going to change in the next 50 years or 100 years, where people wake up because of social media, or because of there's people talking about these sorts of things now. There's books being created. But why is it still the minority of people that actually have proper nutrition? They look after their bodies. Like you've just talked about some amazing things the body does to self-heal. So the body's on your side, and that's whether that's emotional healing or physical healing. You've got your body is there to help you. But I still don't understand. Like I go to the gym every day. I just don't understand why it's quiet. Like I don't understand. Like I speak to one of my buddies who goes to the gym with me first thing in the morning, and I'm like, why isn't there a queue at the door getting more people into the gym? Like the benefits are so clear and so obvious. Every gym should be packed, but they're not. So I don't know. Why do you feel, why is this the minority instead of the majority?
Because I think it's a combination. I think we're just trapped into a society that's laid back. The same thing. When I was a kid, we used to go out and play in the street. It's like that was it. There was no question about it. And now it's kids don't go on the street anymore. They're on their phone or they're watching TV, or it's just this whole system that's set up. It's not as set up to, for healthy living, and it's definitely not giving us the information we need. Here I don't think it's that way in Europe, in England, in the United States. When you watch TV, it's every other ad is a pharmaceutical drug. And then after that ad, then you have the other ads for pizza, and then you have the next ad for pharmaceutical drug. And I think it's still the way that there are only two countries in the world where the government allows drugs to advertise on TV. It's the United States and New Zealand. They got rid of advertising years ago, cigarettes. But why do they allow this? Why do they still allow? Because the money. and as long as it's very powerful, this system to keep you, you know, entranced or believing lies. And but we still got to do what we got to do. We just got to, either write books or speak to people. It's like, what else are we going to do? And hopefully there'll be people coming along, even in the U.S., why is the pharmaceutical industry so powerful? Because they pay for the doctors to go through medical school. And then the people, the government, the senators and congressmen, they all get paid by the big pharma to make sure that they don't go against the pharmaceutical industry, and they don't okay a guideline that you shouldn't eat this or you shouldn't eat that. They're just in control. But we got to keep going, and
Yeah. Yeah. It is crazy. It is crazy because I often just think about follow the money. Like, what's the thing? Like pizza, huge industry, food industry. Like, what are they driven by? They're driven by shareholder value. They're driven by making money. The pharmaceutical industry is exactly the same. They're advertising drugs for you to take and continue to take as well. It also when you start taking a particular drug, you take them on a regular basis. It's not just like a one-time pill that you're fixed. And actually, the whole epidemic around people being overweight and that starts to lead into, obviously and that's come because of the food industry. And then the pharmaceutical industry are then there to give you drugs to try and help you with the heart disease or the cancer or whatever. It's unbelievable because if you think about the money and how people are being guided to kind of go down that route and consume those products, consume the fast food and those sorts of things, the answers to actual real health is local, and it's walking, and it's like completely the different thing, but it's not discussed. And actually I don't remember in my schooling anyone ever sitting me down or talking to me about nutrition and proteins and fats and carbs and macros. You had to go and learn that yourself. No one shared that type of information with you. So of course everyone's going to get it wrong if it's not part of the curriculum or communicated.
And then the doctors, the only way a doctor is going to learn more is if he takes it on his own, under his own, power to go and research. And then you have doctors who will say, hey, now you go to I prefer alternative doctors that, work with other, other types of techniques, whether it's, there's so many different techniques that come, but people, what one of the main problems is that it takes time to change, and people would rather take a drug because it's a pill for an ill. You take this drug, the pain will go away, but then, the long-term effects is what's going to kill you and really make you suffer in later age. And not only that, you take one drug and then you have side effects, and then you buy another drug for the side effects. It's such a, constant thing but it takes time, and people have to, understand that, it's not a pill. Because the pill is
Yeah.
not going to, really make you healthy.
So for your view around longevity, how much of it is just down to then diet? From everything we've just been discussing, it feels like that is one of probably the biggest cornerstone. If someone's going to take something from today and it's to look at something, I think maybe your answer to this is diet has been the first thing.
Yeah, I think when I wrote my first book, The Vegan Wave, not The Vegan Wave, The Thriving Vegan, that was in 2019. I wasn't so aware of the importance of lifestyle practices. I was more, and I would say at that time, it's 90% nutrition, plant-based nutrition. And now I find it, I see more like 70%. 70% plant-based nutrition, and 30% your lifestyle choices. And that's what that's what I feel, that you really have to change your nutrition, because if you just do, the exercise, the other things, it'll be fine. But the closest thing to our inside is what we eat. And the fuel you put in your body is the most important thing for your organs. And the other thing is really important, is whole food. Many people take lots of supplements, and I'm not a supplement guy, and I just B12, because if you're plant based, you're supposed to take B12. And I also take other things like cumin, curcuma, and other things like different types of powders I'll take, but it's not supplements. But vitamins and mineral supplements, for me, it's like you got to eat the whole food, because it's just not the same. The body has been used to whole foods for many millions of years, and supplements have come up decades ago. And to me, it's like the body wants food, real food. And when people start depending too much on the vitamins and minerals, so little is known about it, and the industry is not really controlled very well. You're not getting what the body really wants. And when you eat an apple, and an apple has so many vitamins. It has so many things inside of it, and the body, you take a bite of the apple, and the body accepts it and says, what am I going to do with it, all this stuff? I'm going to take this from it. I'm going to take that from it. I need this amount of this vitamin. I need this amount from it. When you eat the dead vitamin, it's just not the same as a living vegetable or a living fruit. And that's what the body runs. And I found that out from this book I read called Whole by T. Colin Campbell, a fantastic book. He's a biologist. And he talks about this, that we're so stuck on getting into the parts instead of the whole. We need the whole. We need to eat the whole food, and we need to eat, not highly processed foods.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation, Michael. So thank you so much for your time. This before we close, there is some bits I'd like to just chat to you about.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned about purpose. So where does purpose and longevity, where do they link together?
Well, for me, it's purpose, you could say it two ways: having a purpose or having a reason to be alive. It's we have this inside. There's things we love and to do. We've always done all our lives, and we have a purpose. And for me, a purpose is there something you really love to do that maybe you did 50 years ago? You were painted, or you wrote. I used to write when I was in my 20s, and I stopped writing for the rest of my life. And I always wondered, why did I stop? Why can't I write anymore? I used to write when I was back in the 60s, and why can't I write anymore? And then what happened is that it wasn't until I found something that interests me, that I really feel passionate about. Now I could write again, and that's what I'm doing. So I rediscovered this thing. So maybe I don't know. Maybe you like to sing. It's something. It's giving back to life, giving back what when you get older, and this is maybe the best way I can explain it. I've learned, so, when you get older, you have so much experience. I'm in my 80s now. It's a lifetime of experience, a lifetime of understanding and of things. And now I feel that I know a lot of things. So what am I going to do now that I'm in my 80s? I'm going to give back. And I think that maybe it's a way where, sometimes people say that giving feels even better than receiving. When you start giving, whether it's volunteering to something as you get older, there's so many people. I live in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. People are so old here because a lot of people come and they retire here, especially with the U.S. and Canada. And so it's one of the top retirement places for people from the U.S. So there's people there, they're old here, and and I see that they're enjoying their lives here. They're not, it's a point. Well, when you get older and you don't have that many responsibilities, you don't have children to take care of, you don't have a job, or it's not such a big job. You have a lot of time. Now's the time to give back. And I think that's the part of life that we have a wisdom inside of us. And when you get older, you have a chance to take that wisdom and give it back to society. So that's what I say. That's another part of the things. Like, maybe we lose as you get older, you lose your physical abilities. You don't see as well. You don't hear as well. You're not as strong as you used to be, but you have a wisdom based on experience, and that we could tap into it. And that wisdom can come out and you could share it with other people, especially younger people,
Yeah. And also, like, we want to learn, right? We want to learn, we want to understand. And that's why I really love talking to you today. It's because it's like, I often think about, I've just had a baby, right? So little Luca's 8 weeks old.
Wow.
And I think about when Luca's my age and I'm in my 80s, I often think about it and like, how do I want to show up for him? How do I want to be for him? Like, because I want to be there for him, like, and I want to challenge him in the gym. And I think about now, like, what does that mean for me right now today? And I love sort of talking to you and kind of being reflective, because I think a lot about longevity. What do you think? What do you think of, like, we've talked about nutrition, but like, what if you're kind of like sum it up to someone who's thinking about, right, and I want to have longevity, I want to be there for long term for my children, I want to give back, I want all those things. They're real aspirational things. Can you sum it up in just a few things of what's the critical things to do?
Well, I think one of the things you can do is start reading, start paying attention to, alternative media, because the mainstream media is just the mainstream media. But that's what I do. I just research. So if you want to research on health, I can, I have my website. I have particular doctors and scientists that I follow, that I listen to. Dr. Michael Greger, he traveled. They're popular. It's funny, but you won't hear about them until you do the research. Even though they're incredible doctors, and they write about, he called Lesselstein on the heart, prevent and reversing. So I have a list of books, even videos. There's so many videos that are on Netflix, that I can suggest, and then you have I think that's a good way to start. And I put out an article every week on different types of articles, and I have my website, and I'm on Substack, and I'm a podcast guest, so I put them out on my website as well. I'm writing my new book, which is longevity and lifestyle connection. So I'm in the middle of that one. So but you have to really want to do it. I was interesting because we were having lunch with a friend of ours, which was, not that, it didn't feel that healthy, but I started talking about, eating plant-based. He said, well, I don't, I accept dying young. If you have that attitude, it's not dying. That's the big thing. It's the suffering before the dying. That's really, the pain. But it all depends what your attitude is. That if you want to change, it doesn't take much. It really doesn't. It takes weeks. And people shouldn't get this idea. And one thing that's very important, which I want to, maybe bring up, is that don't listen to vegans specifically, because eating vegan doesn't mean that you're eating healthy. And the reason is that most vegans are there for the ethical reasons, protection of animals, torturing of animals. And that's what they do. They'll eat potato chips, drink Coca-Cola, French fries, donuts, whatever, as long as it's not animal product. So they tell you don't eat this, And with a plant-based person like myself, I tell you what to eat if you want to be healthy. So, even in the blue zones, if you find out that you can't eat 100%, in the blue zones, like you mentioned with the Okinawa, they eat fish once in a while. Other places eat meat once in a while. Don't get hung up on that. But the most important thing is to eat more plants. And one of the main reasons, I'm getting into these new things, and one of the main reasons is fiber. Because people are worried about, the great question to vegans is, where do you get your protein from? I mean, I still ask me that, and to have so many athletes are vegans that eat, there's actually a documentary called The Game Changers on Netflix. But this is, it's like, so it's not don't worry about the protein. The problem is you've got to get the fiber, because the fiber is the most important food, is the desired food of your gut bacteria, which is the microbiome. And that's what they thrive on. And that's what they turn into short chain fatty acids, which keep you healthy, keep your immune system strong. So you've got to get fiber, and people don't get enough fiber, not even close to it. People who are on the regular, standard American diet, they don't get close to the amount of fiber that they need. And the people, like you were saying, in Japan and these places in Africa, they get so much fiber because they eat basic things, the fruits and vegetables. So think about the fiber, not so much about the protein. And that's why it's important to change your diet.
Loved our conversation today, Michael. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a really, really wonderful chat.
Thank you, Simon. It was really a great opportunity for me.